Good morning, and thank you for joining us for the third annual Intermodal Logistics Center Forum, this year conducted via webinar. I'm Rusty Intermoser with the Florida Department of Transportation, and I'll be your moderator this morning. These webinar sessions are designed to provide an opportunity for the private sector and public partners to hear from Florida experts about the opportunities in this growing field. Specifically, the agenda includes the application process for the ILC program, ILC development and site selection, where ILC will go in the future, and a question and answer session with prior year awardees. We have about 130 people registered for the webinar, and we welcome you all. Now let's talk for a minute about how the webinar works. If you're new to webinars, here are a few quick tips about your webinar control panel. You can click on the arrows on the left side of the panel to open or close the panel. You can view the presentation in full screen mode with the bottom button on the left side. This webinar is being recorded, which means that all audience members are muted. We'll show you where you can get the recording at the end of the webinar. You may communicate with us by using the question box. If you have a question or a comment, please remember to click send so that we can receive that question or comment. Now, if you have more than one person at your location, would you please enter the number of people at the location in the question box? We'd like to get a better estimate of the number of people attending today's webinar, and we know we have some locations where groups of people are attending. So if you'll do that now, that would be great. Thank you very much. I'm going to introduce our presenters now. We have four. Our first presenter, Rich Biter, is going to speak to us via recording. Rich Biter is Assistant Secretary of the Intermodal Systems Development Division of the Florida Transportation Department. That ISD includes Transportation Development Offices, the Office of Freight, Logistics, and Passenger Operations, and the Performance Management Office. Mr. Biter has over 30 years of transportation technology, research, security, program, and policy experience in private and federal government sectors. He has a significant track record in creating federal intermodal transportation solutions for moving people and goods efficiently, boosting productivity and job growth, and strengthening our nation's competitiveness in the global economy through the more efficient use of our transportation resources. Our second presenter will be Jasmine Raffington, who serves as a Senior Policy Advisor in the Office of the Assistant Secretary and as Manager of the Economic Development Transportation Fund and the Intermodal Logistics Center Infrastructure Support Program. Prior to joining FDOT, she served as a Chief Policy Analyst in the Governor's Office of Policy and Budget, Transportation and Economic Development, and Environmental Policy, serving Governors Scott, Crist, and Bush. Our third speaker today is Bob Emerson, who is currently serving as the Seaports and Waterways Office Manager within the Office of Freight, Logistics, and Passenger Operations for Florida DOT. Previously, he had a 23-year career at the Port of Tacoma, most recently as the Port Senior Director of Industrial Development and Real Estate. Mr. Emerson has extensive seaport industry experience, including industrial and economic development, infrastructure planning, facility and terminal leasing, budget and asset management, foreign trade zone operations, and strategic planning. And finally, our last speaker today will be Jimmy McDonald, who is a project manager with over 15 years of seaport, rail, ILC, and freight transportation planning experience. He has experience in master planning, site planning, and preliminary design, funding scenarios, and regulatory planning and permitting for major transportation freight terminals. Mr. McDonald has worked extensively with the Florida Department of Transportation in the development of the ILC program. To start us off, Secretary Biter will give you some background on the program and explain how this webinar will work.
Hello and welcome to the third annual Intermodal Logistics Center Forum. Thank you for joining us this morning. My name is Richard Biter. I'm the Assistant Secretary for Intermodal Systems Development with the Florida Department of Transportation. The Intermodal Systems Development Offices include the Transportation Development Offices such as Policy and Systems Planning, Environmental and Transportation Statistics, and the Office of Freight, Logistics, and Passenger Operations, which houses aviation spaceports, rail and motor carrier, seaports, and transit. The FLP office was created to act as a tool to better connect, develop, and implement a freight planning process that maximizes the use of existing facilities and integrates and coordinates the various modes of transportation, including the combined utilization of both government-owned and privately owned resources. The office coordinates between the modal offices to ensure that Florida's logistics infrastructure remains cutting edge and aware of transportation innovations. The ILCs are an important part of our logistics infrastructure, which will enable Florida to truly be a global hub for domestic and international trade. I'd like to start by telling you a little bit about the history of the ILC program and what an Intermodal Logistics Center is. An Intermodal Logistics Center, or ILC, is defined as a facility or group of facilities serving as a point of transfer of freight in a specific area physically separated from a seaport, where activities relating to transport, logistics, goods distribution, consolidation, or value-added activities are carried out and whose activities and services are designed to support or be supported by conveyance or shipping through one or more seaports. Intermodal logistics centers can play a significant role in expanding our trade and logistics infrastructure by enhancing our seaports, airports, railroads, and supporting intermodal highway connectors. In the first round of ILC awards alone, ILCs resulted in an estimated creation of over 1,200 total Florida jobs, serving as an example of freight and logistics as the economy in motion. To date, FDOT has awarded over $10.8 million, and applicants have invested their own money for a total combined project cost of over $210 million. Now let me talk a little more about the Seaport Link. Okay, with regards to the Seaport Link for the ILCs, maritime cargo activities at Florida ports are responsible for generating more than 550,000 direct and indirect jobs and $66 billion in total economic value, contributing $1.7 billion in state and local tax revenues. And these ILCs share a strong link to the seaports, as Florida ports are critical engines for our state's economy and therefore are a top investment priority. As Florida is one of the largest states in the nation, in fact, we just became the third largest state in the nation and is still growing, it's important to focus on how to efficiently move freight to its destination, and seaports offer a gateway for those goods. As you may know, working with you, public and private industry stakeholders, Florida recently finalized its Freight Mobility and Trade Plan, which works to ensure that Florida is doing everything it can to improve connections and access while reducing impediments and allowing the private sector to achieve operational efficiencies. The ILC program helps move this focus along, as well as advancing our overall goal of becoming a global hub for trade and logistics activities. The importance of ILCs was recognized by Florida in 2012 when legislation was enacted to support the ILC development through a new ILC grant program. At this time, ILCs were also included as part of the state's strategic intermodal system, also known as the SIS. This legislation, by Florida statute, required that up to $5 million be allocated each year from the State Transportation Trust Fund to fund these ILCs. These funds are strictly for transportation infrastructure improvements like roadway access and were not intended to be used for warehousing or software technology. So far, in the 3 years of the program, over $10.8 million was allocated to 6 different ILC projects throughout the state, located throughout all regions of the state from Panama City to Miami. I'd like to give you a few examples of the ILCs we funded, including the Port Panama City Intermodal Distribution Center. This project was awarded $900,000 in 2013, and the funding helped build access roads and a 20-car rail intermodal cargo transfer facility, both of which are key components of the Intermodal Distribution Center. These improvements helped expand trade and logistics infrastructure and created 23 jobs. Currently, FedEx and Advantage North American, a Panama City-based logistics company, lease space in the facility. Another example of funded project is Prologis, which was awarded $2.5 million over 2 cycles. Prologis is located in Miami-Dade County and will use the awarded funds to pay for road improvements to improve roadway access to 1 million square foot Class A warehouse space. The project has a large economic impact on state and federal taxes and will provide for over 1,600 direct and indirect jobs. Okay, now I want to talk a little bit about previous forums that we've had. To help spread awareness about the grant program, we put together the first ILC program, which was a 2-day event held at Port Everglades in Fort Lauderdale in February of 2013. Over 150 public and private industry stakeholders attended the forum. The forum provides stakeholders and partners with an overview of Florida's opportunities to enhance its freight and logistics system through development and further expansion of intermodal logistics centers. Example agenda items included several different session topics like Florida's opportunities, how to use ILCs to build global trade and logistics centers, and working with regional and local partners. These sessions offered insight into Florida's opportunities from multiple perspectives and how ILCs can tie into those opportunities, what types of workforce and development strategies are needed to support the development of ILCs, and ways in which NPOs and FDOT support their local partners with ILC development activities. Speakers and presenters came from the private sector, the business community, and state and local governments, including such companies as Rooms to Go, Enterprise Florida and Port Everglades, FDOT, the Central Florida Regional Planning Council, and Metro Plan Orlando. The second annual ILC Forum was a 2-day event held at Jacksport with over 200 attendees. This forum offers an opportunity for private sector and public partners to come together to discuss lessons learned from the inaugural year of the ILC program and take a look at the economics of these intermodal logistics centers. Agenda items included questions and answers with prior year awardees, developing ILC opportunities in Florida, and the financing of ILCs. The sessions were both educational and interactive, offering opportunities for participants to help define key opportunities, review best practices in ILC development, and help establish where Florida's ILC program will go in the future. Speakers and presenters came from many different backgrounds and businesses, including the Department of Economic Opportunity, FDOT, Florida East Coast Industries, the Jacksonville Aviation Authority, and the Maritime Administration. And so now let's talk a little bit about the current forum. This now is the 3rd annual ILC forum that FDOT has sponsored, and the webinar series that you're currently attending will be held as a series of 6 webinars over the next 3 days, with a session beginning at 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. each day. I know this is a departure from our normal in-person format, but we hope that by offering the flexibility of a webinar, we're offering you the chance to pick and choose your sessions to best line up with your time and interest. Today, there are 2 sessions, each discussing different aspects of the ILC application process. Tomorrow's sessions include a question and answer with prior year awardees, which will provide potential applicants a chance to learn more about the specific projects that have been funded through the program over the past few years, and to chart a course for the future, which will discuss the information about which potential rule changes have been considered and why, and will provide an interactive discussion of where the program is headed. On Thursday, we will focus on ILC development and site selection, and the morning session, the ILC development, will offer insight into options for financing ILCs, including local and state incentives like FDOT's Strategic Intermodal System and the State Infrastructure Bank loans, as well as information on the programs and incentives of the Division of Economic Opportunity and Enterprise Florida offer. The afternoon session will be site selection. We'll focus on how to give Florida sites an edge and what makes a site successful and attractive to site selectors. We hope you find the sessions we put together for you both informative, interesting, and most of all, rewarding. This morning's session is the ILC application process, part 1. We've set up some great speakers for you today. They'll be talking to you about the application process, giving you a detailed background of the ILC program, and providing a brief discussion and overview of the statute and rule behind the program. They'll also be discussing the links to seaports, like why it's important to move goods through a port, and how important the intermodal link has become. Okay, with that as a way of introduction and background, I'd now like to turn the microphone over to your speakers, and once again, thank you for tuning in, and look forward to an engaging next few days over the ILC webinar. Thank you.
All right, thank you. We thank Secretary Bider for his introduction and overview, and I'd now like to welcome our first speaker, Jasmine Rathington.
Thank you for participating in the webinar series. This is my first opportunity to present at a webinar, and I'm very excited about the opportunity, and I hope it will be both informative and an effective way of receiving the information. And with that, I will begin. Florida is the 21st largest economy in the world, and with 19.5 million residents, as Secretary Bider indicated, we are the third largest state in the country, but we also have almost 100 million visitors each year, which makes us one of the largest markets in the U.S. for consumer goods and commodities. We're also an agricultural and mining centers in the U.S. There are 48,000 farms and ranches in our state, and they produce this $9 billion a year in agricultural products are produced in our state and shipped throughout the nation and the world. Florida mining produces $2.5 billion of goods that are transported through the state, the country, and the world. And we also have a diverse manufacturing sector. We are not, when you talk about Florida and manufacturing, well, it's not one of the things that people think about, but we have, our manufacturers produce $39.6 billion of goods that are transported throughout the state, the country, and international markets. So we have a thriving sector that we want to grow, but all of these things combine to make trade and logistics a huge part of the state's economy. Every trade and logistics job, next slide, in our state supports about 2 other Florida jobs. When you look at this multiplier, we can attribute 22% of our existing jobs to trade and logistics. When you and just to give you just a little overview of some of the impact of this sector, wholesale trade in our state, and these are 2013 numbers from the U.S. Department of Commerce, that generated $56.5 billion in trade, wholesale trade. Retail trade was $61.6 billion. And when you look at the impact of warehousing in our state, that's $24.5 billion. And again, when you combine that with the manufacturing, this is a significant amount of trade volume, cargo that moves across our system through all modes of transportation. And next slide, please. Florida, as Secretary Bider said, that a big part of our economic growth strategy is to make the state of Florida a global hub for trade. Since this sector is already a key part of our economy, it was logical that we would try to develop ways to grow and expand on that. And since Governor Scott took over, the governor and the department has really focused on this aspect of our economy and looking for ways to grow it. Next slide, please. Intermodal logistics centers are a part of that strategy. And as Secretary Bider said, that they're industrial facilities that are operated to ensure the efficient transfer and processing of freight, and by linking multiple modes of transportation. Next slide, please. I'll see it again. Secretary Bider discussed this. They enhance our ability to move freight through seaports, airports, railways, interstate highways, and they connect all of these facilities to create a statewide freight and logistics center, or they help to do so. Next slide, please. The infrastructure support program, ILC infrastructure support program, was created in 2012. It's codified in section 311.101, and it provided for the first time a mechanism for the department to address the specific infrastructure needs of ILCs, and also a mechanism to include ILCs in the strategic intermodal system. Before this statute was enacted, we really didn't have a tool that would allow us to support essentially private infrastructure, which are, infrastructure on privately owned property, and many of the ILCs that we've supported so far are private. It doesn't mean that we wouldn't be able to fund public roads as we traditionally have. But this program really was a tool to allow us to reach that area that we otherwise weren't able to reach. When the program was created, it required the department to allocate at least up to $5 million a year, and it has, we've updated the program a bit to make the $5 million the baseline. So each year we will allocate at least $5 million to this program. Next slide, please. The ILC program is a rule-based program, and the requirements for interacting with the program, what's an eligible project, et cetera, how we determine which projects we will fund are contained in Chapter 14-118 in the Florida Administrative Code. I've put up on my slides the IP address at the Department of State. It's also on the department's website, but that is the state's official rule portal. So as you seek to interact with the program, I encourage you to take the time to look at the rule and look at the various requirements, because those requirements are reflected in the application that you will submit if you're seeking a grant, and it will help you to determine how to present your project in the most the best light and increase your probability of getting funded. Next slide, please. The ILC program is not intended to fund every type of ILC or every ILC that could possibly be built, because, as we said, the definition of ILC is fairly broad. This program hones in on the group of ILCs that are not first, because it's theoretically possible to have an on-port ILC, but in order to be eligible for program funding, the ILC cannot be within the boundaries of one of Florida's seaports, private marine terminal, or commercial airport. However, we can fund and are willing to fund ILCs that are within an existing rail or truck terminal. And another key provision that emanates from the statute and the rule is an applicant has to demonstrate that their project will interact efficiently with our existing transportation network, especially as it relates to a request to fund private infrastructure. So it cannot be something that is not subsequently connected to the existing system. Next slide. The other key issue that potential applicants must demonstrate is address the economic benefit of the project. How does the project contribute to increasing economic activity in our state? Whether or not the project ships freight through one of Florida's ports, and also to demonstrate a local commitment both from local governments, other groups, and the applicant themselves. Because a key goal of the program is to encourage economic activity in our state and to leverage the dollars that the program provides and not to fully fund projects. So you have to show both a broader economic benefit as well as the commitments of others to the project. Next slide. One key issue that I would like to make sure I emphasize to you, although an ILC is a large industrial facility with multiple structures and it could include offices, for the ILC infrastructure program, the eligible project is a transportation facility. So the program defines transportation facility as structures that move people and property from place to place, and that's codified in section 334.03. So it's very important as you develop your project to understand that your development plan for your ILC may include warehousing and other facilities, but the eligible project that you would be able to seek funding from the department for is a transportation component of that project. Next slide. Once you've identified your eligible project, we are only looking to fund 50% of those costs. So if your overall development plan may be $30 million, and of that you've got $5 million in transportation facilities, your application to the department would only be for a maximum of $2.5 million. The other key issue on funding is, and this emanates from the statute and the rule, we cannot provide a single project with more than half of what the allocation for the program is that year, for that fiscal year. So if we have a minimum of $5 million, assuming it's $5 million, a single project will not receive more than $2.5 million. If the allocation for that year is $8 million, a single project could not receive more than $4 million. So as you submit your application and you draft it and try to determine what you will need, it may be a good idea up front to reach out to us and see what the funding range is for that particular fiscal year, to understand that if you're going to request $4 million in a year where the total allocation is $6 million, we will not consider that. The maximum we would be able to consider would be $3 million, so that will help you. Next slide, please. Well, I guess that's all I was planning to cover. I was feeling like I was on a roll. The other presenter will cover a little bit more detail on the connectivity of the program to our seaport. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you, Jasmine. And now we will welcome our next speaker, Bob Emerson, who is the statewide Seaport Manager for the Florida Department of Transportation.
Next slide, please. Thank you. I'm going to cover, as was mentioned, a little more detail, a little bit background on the Florida Seaport System, the link to the ILC program, and why those things work in concert with each other to improve the overall flow of goods and products through Florida. Next slide. As was mentioned, to qualify for the ILC program grant, an ILC must support or be supported by conveyance of shipping through one or more of Florida's deep water seaports. Next slide. This was created because the original impetus for creating the program was to actually help improve seaport capacity. Speeding the movement of products off the seaport, the on-water seaport terminals, directly getting them moved out to the consumers, getting them off the port as quickly as possible, having them distributed through either nearby or regional ILC facilities helps speed the capacity and the velocity of goods moving through the ports. Good slide. Florida, due to our great location, South Atlantic and the Gulf of Mexico, is an excellent gateway for all kinds of goods and products coming into the U.S. and into the large Florida market, as was mentioned before. There's a wide variety of products coming in right now, and there's a lot of activities happening throughout the world shipping lanes that are increasing the probability of cargo coming to Florida ports that we'll talk about in the next few slides. Even though, well, let's go to the next slide first. So this really shows the 15 deep water seaports of Florida. We'll show a little bit more of the cargo coming through them. But this gives you an idea of where the seaports are located, and it also shows the rail network and what we call the strategic intermodal system highway network as well. It doesn't show all of the highways, but just our CIS highways. And you can see that our ports are distributed very broadly across both the Gulf and the Atlantic coasts. Next slide. This is a chart that shows total tonnage through the ports. And as was mentioned before, Florida has a couple of unique situations. One is we don't really have any pipelines that come down into Florida. So all of our bulk liquid products, petroleum products that are consumed in Florida come in through our seaports. In addition, as Jasmine mentioned, our significant mining activity, we have a lot of dry bulk products that are shipped out through our seaports. So this shows the distribution of total tonnage, which would include all of those bulk products, project cargoes, break bulk products, and container products, but from a tonnage standpoint. And you can see that we have a lot of activity in the Tampa Bay area, and then both in Northeast Atlantic and the Southeast Atlantic, and some activity over on the Panhandle as well. Next slide. This chart shows containerized cargoes, and of course containerized cargoes are important because that is really the type of cargo that the ILCs will be handling. Right now, Florida has over 3 million TEUs, and that's the standard measurement of containerized cargo, which stands for a 20-foot equivalent unit. The typical container is a 40-foot container, so that would be 2 TEUs. So keep that in mind as we're talking about truck moves. It does not necessarily equate to TEUs. But here's the distribution. We have 3.2 million TEUs a year coming into Florida, and that is roughly equal to what the state of Georgia does. So Florida is the 3rd or 4th largest state in containerized cargo. But our containerized cargo comes through several Florida ports. Again, heavy activity in southeast Florida, primarily Everglades, which is in Fort Lauderdale, Port of Miami, and Palm Beach, and then significant activity up in northeast Atlantic, primarily at Jacksonville. But several of our ports handle containerized cargoes. And even though right now you don't see a lot of container cargo activity in our central ports, say Canaveral and Tampa, Atlantic and Gulf side, we do anticipate over the long term that those ports will also grow significantly in containerized cargoes. Next slide. As I mentioned before, these cargoes represent a significant economic benefit to the state. Over $86 billion in waterborne international trade comes through our ports, and we have 680,000 direct and indirect jobs and $96 billion in economic value. Through recent studies, we've calculated that $1 invested in seaport infrastructure yields over $6.90 to the state economy. Next slide, please. Realizing the importance of ports, the Governor Scott, starting in year 2011, we've invested to date over $850 million in new seaport infrastructure, and that is just state funding of infrastructure. Those funds are typically matched by ports on a 50% basis, and there's significant federal funding involved too. So the actual investments in state ports over the last 4 years is much greater than the $850 million you see here. Recent projects have included on-dock rail projects at Port Everglades, Miami, deep dredging at Miami that'll bring Miami down to 50 feet. That will make, and that'll be completed here in 2015. That'll make Miami only the 3rd seaport on the East Coast to have depths of 50 feet or greater. And increasing port capacity into the future with further dredging projects and other terminal and rail connectivity projects is a high priority for us into the future. A lot of these projects have also involved, in addition to the $850 million in direct seaport funding, which is largely on port, a lot of the Florida Department of Transportation's projects over the last several years have been increasing the connectivity of seaports to our highway and rail infrastructure networks. Things like the tunnel in Miami and a number of overpasses to create grade separations in Port Everglades are examples. Next slide. Next slide. Next one. We did this one, yes. So as we look to the future, there's a number of things that that are impacting Florida's ability to grow in a very positive way. The Panama Canal expansion, which was originally scheduled to be completed in 2014, which is now scheduled to be completed in the first quarter of 2016, will allow larger vessels, typically container vessels, to transit the canal, making an all-water trade route from Asia to Florida much more feasible than it is today. Also, the increased use of the Suez Canal. The Suez Canal can handle very large ships, the largest ships afloat, and that is also a potential route from Asia to Florida, although primarily Suez Canal is used from Asia to Europe. Future trade with Cuba. The recent activities in opening up trade with Cuba has a lot of great potential for Florida, obviously for potential cruise activity, but containerized cargoes, consumer goods to Cuba, products from Cuba coming up to the U.S. is a great potential for us. This last item here on the slide is a very important item. We mentioned that right now Florida ports are bringing in 3.2 million containers a year, actually both import and export. But we consume much more containerized cargo than we bring in through our ports. And 45% of this cargo right now is currently coming into Florida via ports in other states. So that product comes down our highway system. I-75, I-95 into Florida. And what's interesting about that is even though you didn't see that Central Florida was a huge container import area right now, that is a major distribution area for the state because these cargoes coming into Florida come into Central Florida, get distributed out through distribution centers there. So as you look for opportunities for your own facilities, obviously near the existing large container ports of Southeast Florida and Northeast Florida are ideal sites, but also sites in the central part of Florida because of the growing activity at ports in the future and just the flow of goods that comes down the entire peninsula of Florida. So for all of those reasons, you can see that the role of ILCs, handling containerized cargo, helping the ports move that cargo swiftly off the terminals and getting that directly to the consumer and moving products from areas through manufacturing in Florida through the distribution centers out to the ports as well. Another unique benefit I think I forgot to mention was Florida's cargoes are pretty much a 50-50 mix of import-export. I come from the west coast of the U.S. where that is not the case. We import a lot more than we export through the west coast, but here in Florida, these cargo flows are almost 50-50. So don't just think about products coming into the ports, but also the opportunity to support the flow of products going out through the ports as well. Thank you very much.
All right, Bob, thank you so very much. That was very interesting. Our next speaker is Jimmy McDonald, who is Senior Seaport Planner with the Florida Department of Transportation.
Good morning, and I'd like to, first of all, thank all of you for attending and providing this opportunity to share with you a little bit about the process. This morning I'm going to be speaking specifically to that, kind of a ILC application 101 or application for dummies, if you would, and that is just to kind of help from our experience seeing numerous applications through the past couple of years, seeing kind of what made an application successful, what things were included that provided that opportunity, and kind of work through that process with you. So hopefully this will be beneficial to those of you who are potentially preparing applications now or in the future, and also maybe if you applied and were not successful, this will help you a little bit with maybe why that was. So I'll start off with kind of a brief overview of what I'm going to be speaking about. It'll be the application process, where to find the application. That could be a good start if you haven't been able to find it. When to submit applications, what to include in your application, what makes a successful application, reasons why application did not result in project funding, and as always, if you weren't successful, then we encourage you to continue trying. Okay, so let's start off with why the application, or why the application process overall. It's important that we gain information here at the DOT that helps us to rate projects on a level playing field, to get the necessary information to be able to determine whether a project meets the statutory requirements, and also the requirements that are based in the rule process that was developed at the beginning of the ILC program. We're looking for projects that meet that basic intent that was developed in statute, and that also was refined in the rulemaking process. One thing to really focus on in the beginning is to thoroughly read through the statute and the rule, to familiarize yourselves with the key points that were placed in each of those, and and we try to define that for you in the application itself. One thing also to remember, this is the Department of Transportation that is funding these projects. So, we are interested in transportation-related projects. So if your project doesn't seem to have that sense to it, or the portion of the project that you're requesting funding on, then you may want to reconsider applying for funds. Projects that are ready to go is another area that we are concerned about. We really need to have projects in this program that are either in the design process or that are in the already prepared, ready to go, shovel-ready type projects. They're ready for construction. So if we can go on to the next slide, where do you find the application? So there's two different places initially that you can find it. You want to go to our web portal at Freight Moves Florida, and it's freightmovesflorida.com, and you go to the tab at the top that says Intermodal Logistics Centers. And under that tab, you will find the application at the bottom of the page in both Word and PDF format. So it's very easy for you to download it from that location. If you are having trouble for some reason with that, then you can also go to the FDOT Procedures and Documents and Forms site. That's the easiest way to get there that I've found is just to Google those specific terms. And then you'll come up with the link to the FDOT Procedures, Documents, and Forms website. At that point, there's a tab on that page that says Most Requested on the left-hand side, and it says Forms directly under that. Click on Forms, and then I always do it by office. It's the easiest way for me to find it this way. And under that, you want to look for the Freight, Logistics, and Passenger Operations office. And at the bottom of that page, there's only 4 forms currently located on that page. You'll look for the Application for Intermodal Logistics Centers Infrastructure Support Program. The actual number is 725-85 or 085-1. So those are the two easiest ways to get to the application. Or if you're still having trouble, please feel free to email either Jasmine Rathington, Bob, or myself, and we'd be happy to send it to you via email. Now, the application process also has an annual window. The first 2 years, we left it open the entire year, but in the current year, we just decided to divide it into 2 windows. And this is just to help us on the processing side and to be able to decide how funds were going to be delivered throughout that fiscal year. So the first annual window will be from July 1 to October 31st. And the second annual window is from January 1 to March 31st. So we are currently in the second window of funding for the fiscal year 2014-2015 cycle. What to include in your application? We feel like this is really important because in the past, successful applications have been able to provide all the elements that are in the application form and in the appendices that are requested in that form. The most important things to remember when you're preparing an application is to complete the form itself. And if you have questions, please just reach out to one of us and let us help you with that portion of it. Sometimes things can be confusing how to convey information. One of the areas that we really appreciate is a good description of the project in the project description section of the application. That description, don't give us just the overall project description, but focus somewhat on the transportation aspects that you're requesting funding for. That helps us to, as we summarize the projects and begin to look at them, that we better understand exactly the transportation aspects that you're requesting us to participate funding on. Also, good site photos and project photos help us to better understand exactly what the project is that you're asking for funding on. That, along with quality maps that show the overall project site, also area location maps, which are more of a zoomed out map showing the transportation infrastructure connecting to your facility or site, and also the connection to the port facilities that you are intending to show that you're connecting to. This is very, very helpful in us in helping to determine the overall connectivity to the system and the project's overall transportation components. Also, one of the areas, and we try to make it simple as possible, but the appendices A through J listed in the application is a good reference. It's actually called Appendix 3 on the application, and that is a good step-by-step guide for some of the additional information that not only is required by statute and rule for us to have in the application, but it also, again, helps us to determine and compare applicants as we go through the application process, application review process. So when you're doing that, I wanted to just expand a little bit on that. If you look at that portion of the application, A through J, it has a statement or a question of something that it's requesting. I'll give you an example. A says, statement demonstrating how the ILC and the project increase state economic activity. So in a section like that, we're asking that you provide information about your project that describes how it is going to impact the overall transportation system and how it's going to increase throughput, economic activity, jobs, and so on. And again, if you have questions on any of these areas as you're producing an application, please send us an email, give us a call on the phone. We'd be happy to better describe the intent and what we're looking for. So moving forward, what makes a successful application? Over the past two ILC program fiscal cycles, some projects have been funded and some have not. There have been applications that we felt did not meet the intent of the statute as it was written and the rule as it was developed. So some of the common success stories that I'd like to share with you today will kind of give you a feel for what it is we're looking for at the Department of Transportation in a successful application. First of all, we want overall project to meet the primary program intent. And I think you kind of heard from Rich Bider early in this presentation, the initial intention was to help to better make Florida a freight and logistics hub, utilizing the entire system. And so also connecting to the seaports, as you heard from Bob, providing a way to alleviate constraints on the seaports themselves and provide additional throughput, freight throughput through those facilities by moving it quickly to a location off port like an ILC or a distribution center. The second thing is the applicant, we looked at that they were responsive. If we had requests for information, successful applicants in the past were very quick to respond to our questions or let us know that they were looking into it and that they would get back to us. I think it's important that we understand that when we came to you to ask for additional information, that you're responsive, that you're trying to find an answer. We also think it's important that applicants provide that information as best they can. And if they can't provide the information, let us know and we'll try to work through it with you, and maybe there's a different way to ask for the information that you're trying to provide. Also, just make sure that you do that you are forthright in asking us questions and responding to our questions. One of the things that we also have made successful applications is that the applicant was clear in providing the economic benefits and the return on investments portions of it. We use that as a critical evaluation tool for most of our projects, not just ILCs at the Department of Transportation in recent years, and we use that to help determine as we go forward to make a selection on a project. Also, applicants that show documentation from prospective users or expansion of existing users. And what I mean by that is potential tenants, potential lessees, the property user or owner, that they are showing that they have agreements in place, whether agreements of understanding or memorandums of agreements themselves. That helps us see that we're investing in something that is already going to be moving forward when construction is complete. So moving forward, some reasons why applications did not result in project funding. And this is just to kind of help you understand some possibilities that may not allow the DOT to move forward and fund a project. Primarily, as we stated before, the overall project's intent, if it does not meet the primary items stated in the statute and in the rule, those are going to be things that will prevent the project itself from moving forward. And again, we will and have so far on every application, if there was a major flag like this, we reached out to the applicant and said, hey, you're missing this, or we don't understand how you responded to this. Please provide this additional information. And in some cases, we were able to get over that hurdle, and in other cases, they were not able to get back to us or provide information that got us over that hurdle. Applicant never provided basic project information in the initial application. We had a couple applications that they weren't complete applications. They didn't provide the information requested, and they never got back to us with the request for additional information, and the project at that point was not moving forward. And again, if an applicant does not respond to an RAI, then we at that point do not feel that the project, if we're asking for additional information, then we need that information to make a decision. If we do not ask for the information, we have not had an applicant yet that was perfect. I know everybody likes to think that their applications are perfect or their work is done, but we have over the years gone out and asked for more information from every applicant. So don't be offended or frightened if we do ask you for this additional information. It's just part of the process, and we try to be efficient and prudent with that. This is an important area. Applicants had difficulty separating the overall project and the transportation components for which FDOT funds were being requested. So really, sometimes the projects are much bigger than the transportation component itself that you're requesting funds for. It may be an entire distribution center park or what have you, an ILC that is a larger piece of infrastructure than just the transportation component for which you're requesting ILC funds. Be sure to differentiate between the two. We want you to describe the overall project in the application, but we also want you to provide focus on the transportation elements, whether it be the entry road, the access roads to the facility within the terminal, the access rail to the facility within the terminal, or other modes of conveyance that may be worked out in the application process. Also, applicant could not properly document agreements or letters of intent from a prospective user or expansion of existing users. So, one of the things that we request in the additional information in Appendices 3 is that you provide statements documenting commitments from private sector businesses operating at ILCs, or that they have executed a contract to operate at the ILC. So it's important that you provide that in your application. Some examples in the past that were successful, they showed that they had an agreement with Nike or with a fruit provider or a clothing and apparel provider, or something to that effect, a specific memorandum of agreement or memorandum of understanding that they intend to locate at that facility, or even better, that they are under contract at that facility. So those are very helpful and necessary in a successful application. And one of the last things is that the applicant must show shipment of goods through one of Florida's 15 seaports as defined in Chapter 311. It is critical because it's in statute that at this point in time that under this $5 million program that it would utilize one or more of Florida's 15 seaports. So moving forward, I just want to encourage everybody. I kind of put a, as a tribute to my mother, who's always taught me over the years that if you don't succeed at something, you should continue to try, and you should continue to move forward. The Department of Transportation by no means is trying to kill projects. We are out here to help the economic vitality of the state of Florida and to develop a transportation system that is better for the user, in this case for economic development in freight and logistics and movement of freight and passengers. And we really are excited about applications and excited about potential projects, and we want you to be successful. And so we encourage you, if at first it's not successful, there may be structural reasons for that cannot be changed. Your project may not be an ILC, but it could just be something in the process that we can correct. So we encourage you to reach out to one of us, and hopefully you will be a successful applicant in the future with the Florida Department of Transportation Intermodal Logistics and program. So thank you for letting me speak to you, and have a great rest of your day.
Jimmy, thank you so much. I think our future applicants are going to find a lot of great information in your presentation, and we appreciate yours as well as Bob Emerson's and Jasmine Raffington. A lot of good stuff that bodes well for the rest of the webinars this week. We do have a few questions. One question we'd like to get clarification on, so if you ask this question, if you could type in a clarification on how is this coordinated digitally across a network rather than just physically. We're not clear on what exactly you're asking on that question. The next question that we got asks our panelists to discuss the issue of equipment imbalance for import, export, and domestic trades, and what it means for the state's competitiveness and how ILCs might help in addressing the issue. So who'd like to address that question? Bob?
Yeah, this is Bob Emerson. Alan, as I understand your question, you're talking about the fact that right now a lot of the product that comes into Florida comes down our two main interstate corridors of I-75 and I-95 from distribution centers outside Florida. What that does create a lot of traffic going down almost the entire length of Florida, since the largest consumer markets in Florida are really from the midpoint down, from central Florida down to the south. So what happens is those over-the-road trailers come from distribution centers outside Florida now. They create a lot of traffic on our freeways. They drop their loads at distribution centers or at the endpoint consumers or stores, and then they go back empty, which again creates traffic on the highways, hauling a lot of empty large trailers. So as the more of this cargo comes to Florida, and again what's interesting about this 45% of cargo not currently coming is that for our ports to grow, we don't need our overall market to grow. We just need to capture that cargo that's currently not coming through Florida. That's one very important aspect. The other aspect is that each of our Florida ports can grow without taking cargo away from other Florida ports. So we're able to grow cooperatively. And the distribution of those products is already happening because we're consuming them. So the more products that come in through the ports, then we have an intermodal logistics center that can handle those containers coming from the port to the distribution center. The empty container goes back to the port, and then the full trucks are the only ones clogging up or using, hopefully not clogging up, our interstate freeway system. So more containerized cargoes coming through Florida, through ILC distribution centers, should help the overall efficiency of our entire freight network. Hopefully that answers the question for you.
Great. And if there are additional components to the question, please feel free to write them in now. And if any of you have other questions, we've still got time for more. One question that was just asked, are seaports the only type of hub that an ILC can support? What about airports? Jimmy, you want to take that one?
Yeah, I can answer that question. Let me get closer to the mic here.
Okay.
In this program that we're discussing today, that is specifically the ILC Infrastructure Support Program, the primary hub currently is seaports. However, as you've heard Secretary Fider say earlier, there is the SIS element of the program, which in the SIS element, it allows for airports and seaports. Now that program has developed policy as to ILCs, and that can be, I believe that's going to be discussed later on in this presentation series. Not today, but later on. So if you have questions specific to the SIS, please write them in, and we will try and answer those at a later time.
Great, thanks, Jimmy. All right, next question. Does the new DOT Secretary support the ILC program? I'm sorry, the question elves are waving at me wanting to know something.
Jasmine wanted to make a comment on the last question as well.
Thank you, Jimmy.
I wanted to say, although the statute and the rule requires that you ship through a seaport, if you've got a project that also has connectivity through an airport, even the bulk of products moving through an airport, submit that project as well. Under the current legal framework, you have to have some activity through a seaport so that we can check the box. But if you've got one that includes freight moving through an airport, that project will also rate well once you have a minimum threshold or something going through the seaport. And we would certainly look at that project favorably and wish to support it as well. So please submit it.
So Jasmine, while you're up here, would you like to answer our next question? Does the current new secretary support the ILC program?
Yes. Secretary Boxall is a very, very big supporter of this program. He's also looking for ways that we can help the ILCs be successful, because he fully embraces the governor's commitment to growing the state's economy, and he understands the value of what you do. And he's certainly looking for opportunities to figure out what can we do next in addition to this program. And one of our sessions will be talking about where do we want to take this program. And he is definitely a interested and willing listener. So if you've got some thoughts on that issue, feel free to provide that. But he is a strong supporter.
Great. Thank you, Jasmine. Okay, we did get a clarification on that previous question, and the clarification is there an internet-based system that shows all capacity in Florida that's sponsored by the state? Jimmy, did you want to take that one?
Sure, I'll take that question. Thank you very much. That was a good question. And currently the answer to that is we don't have a comprehensive system at DOT, but the department is moving towards consolidating its data and working in a consolidated means through our Transportation Statistics Office. They're in the process of evolving through this and working with all the difficulties with the different types of data sources and what have you. The point of contact in the Transportation Statistics Office is the manager, Ed Hutchinson, and if you need his contact information, just email one of us and we will provide that to you. But he is, they currently are working on that and would be able to explain what they're doing to acquire those types of processes.
Great. Another question we received is how much money is left in the current funding cycle? Who wants that question? Jasmine?
Sure. We currently have about $4.1 million left out in our allocation. However, if you've got a project that you're working on submitting and you think that you're going to need more than $4.1 million, please apply. The fact that we only have 4.1 doesn't mean that if we've got a wonderful project out there, we wouldn't be able to work with a secretary who is a strong supporter to see if we could either find the funding in current year or work with you to support a portion of the project in current year and look toward the future for the remaining balance. So the 4.1 limitation isn't really a limit. It is just what we have in the checkbook at the moment, and that amount can change based on need for an outstanding project.
Okay, so our last question, Jasmine, why don't you stay up for this one? What is the #1 goal of the ILC program?
I think that the program really, the #1 goal of the program is to support projects that will grow our economy and to capitalize on our already robust freight and logistics industry sector, and to bring in the private sector as key participants in the state government by funding otherwise unreachable private infrastructure projects to help you grow and develop and hire Floridians. So I think that this is, above all else, an economic development transportation program.
Okay, great. Thank you. And I'd like to thank all of you very much for joining us today. Especially like to thank our speakers, Secretary Biter, Jasmine Rackington, Jimmy McDonald, and Bob Emerson. And as I said at the beginning of the webinar, the session has been recorded, so if you want to listen again or if you have any folks that you know that might be interested in seeing it, it'll be posted in the next day or so on the website that you see here on the slide. Finally, if you register today, you'll receive a very brief survey through the email, and we hope you'll take a minute to give us your feedback. We use your feedback to make our future webinars so much better. Please join us this afternoon at 2 o'clock for part 2 of the application process, and then the rest of the week for the rest of our webinars. Thank you for joining us, and have a good afternoon.